Welcome to the Colleague Experience podcast episode. Get ready to delve into bold insights, experimentation, and groundbreaking leadership strategies. Today, we're exploring the fascinating world of counterfactuality, examining how alternative historical paths could reshape our approach to organizational frameworks. We'll uncover why embracing flexibility over rigid predictability is crucial for modern success. Let's dive in. Counterfactuality, or what we might call alternative reality thinking, deals with the fundamental question of what would have happened if the facts as they occurred had not unfolded in exactly the same way. This concept has expressions across various fields of study, with history being one of the most prominent examples. It turns out that there are historians, even those considered extremely serious in their field, who ask what-if questions. Now you might ask, quite reasonably, whether something like Tarantino's Inglourious Basterds counts as historical research of this type. Those same historians would tell you that counterfactuality has a place in academic research only when it remains at a small and possible distance from the actual story. For instance, what would have happened if the British had not succeeded in rescuing their forces at Dunkirk? What would have happened if the Germans had conquered Stalingrad? These are considered scenarios that had a very reasonable possibility of occurring. In other words, a counterfactual story to be interesting from a historical perspective, two conditions must be met. There must be a junction where the distance between one possibility and another is very small, and the development of history from that point must be significant. If we think about it, we perform this mental exercise all the time. Consider a historical junction related to a very current event. Since October 7th, there have been quite a few voices in public discourse claiming that if not for the 2005 disengagement or the 1993 Oslo Accords, this disaster would not have occurred. It doesn't matter what your position is on this issue. That's not the point here. The possibility that there would be no disengagement is quite reasonable. It did happen, but it certainly was reasonable that it might not have occurred. In other words, there was a historical junction here. But here comes the interesting part. In reality, there was a disengagement, so in this path we can relatively easily investigate what led to what. But what would have happened if we had chosen the other path? What would have happened without the disengagement? Here we tend to make a logical fallacy. We assume that the reality that existed before the disengagement, which we know, would have continued as it was. So essentially, we're making a comparison between the current reality and a reality that existed 20 years ago. What would have happened in the Gaza Strip without the disengagement? It's hard to know. Perhaps reality would have developed in such a way that the disaster would have been prevented. Perhaps not. Maybe it would have been better, but maybe not. It's hard to know. To know, we would need counterfactual historical investigation. But we must not make the logical fallacy that assumes if we had chosen a different path at the junction, then what existed before the junction would have continued after it as well. Why do we make this logical fallacy, and how does all this relate to our organizational framework? Regarding the first question, why we make this logical fallacy, the answer is that it's easy. We know what the situation was before. We know what the situation was after. So we make a comparison between two familiar realities. But it's not just that. There's something deeper, in our opinion, in our tendency to assume foundational assumptions of this type. This tendency expresses an aspiration for an ordered world. A world with clear cause and effect, a distinct connection between action and result. Why do we love order? Because it connects with control for us. If the world is ordered, meaning there's a distinct connection between action and result, we can plan the future. We can know with a high level of certainty what will be. We love certainty. We love control. Therefore, despite the fact that a significant portion of our plans don't materialize, we very much love to plan the future. Ask managers, and you'll hear that their wish is to see the organization operating in perfect coordination, like a well-oiled machine. This is the classic and most popular organizational analogy. A well-oiled machine. A machine that, given the input it receives, allows us to know with certainty the output it will produce. This image sketches the conception of a good organization. A good organization is one that enables complete control over its products and the relationship between inputs and outputs. In such an organization, there's an order that dictates the flow of materials and information between different units and between employees. Order is not only the aspiration of the organization and its managers, but it is the very definition of the organization itself. Organized, as its name suggests. In any case of deviation from order, meaning every time the results of activity in the organization differ from expectations, this is a fundamental deviation from the idea of being an organization. If you will, it's an organizational sin. Hence, the role of managers is to be gatekeepers. Their job is to ensure that all components in the system adhere to the predetermined system of rules. In our consulting work with a major telecommunications infrastructure company, we witnessed this machine thinking firsthand. The leadership team had spent months developing detailed project timelines for rolling out fiber optic networks across rural communities. Every step was mapped, every dependency identified, every resource allocated with precision. When external factors, unexpected environmental regulations, supply chain disruptions, and community resistance derailed their carefully orchestrated plan, management's immediate response was to double down on control mechanisms. They added more checkpoints, more approval layers, more detailed reporting requirements. The irony was that their pursuit of machine-like predictability actually slowed progress and frustrated field teams who needed flexibility to navigate real-world complexities. Similarly, we worked with a large communication agency that had developed what they called their content production machine. They had systematized every aspect of campaign development, from initial brainstorming through final delivery, with predetermined timelines and standardized processes. When a major client requested significant creative pivots mid-campaign due to shifting market conditions, the agency's rigid system couldn't adapt. The result was missed deadlines, frustrated creatives, and ultimately a lost client relationship. The pursuit of machine-like efficiency had eliminated the very flexibility that makes creative work valuable. In parentheses, we should note that this is where the motivation to constantly learn from the past comes from, to be a learning organization. If there's something that drives us crazy, it's those long, tedious, lessons learned sessions that, let's be honest, don't produce much. We simply assume that if we know how to break down the process into its components and find failures in them, we can fix them and run the process again with much greater success. To this, all we have left to say is, come on, really. But the analogy between a human organization and a machine hasn't been relevant for many years. Why? Because a machine, once you've designed it to do something, will continue to do it without intervention indefinitely. The plan according to which it was designed dictates the order of operations between its parts. The machine's parts have no preferences or desires or aspirations of their own about how to operate. If the designer did a good job, the machine will work without problems. Organizations, on the other hand, are based on human beings who are somewhat less convenient creatures for operating according to a dictated plan, especially in our times. The fact that a manager has planned a certain order according to which the organization will operate doesn't guarantee that the different parts, the employees, will actually implement this plan exactly as written. And indeed, as you know very well, most organizations have a tendency to deviate from order, And what sometimes brings them back is the control and oversight mechanisms of the managers. The more complex the reality, the less ordered the organization becomes, and more control is required to return it to order. Control and oversight are not necessarily bad things, but it's important to be aware of the price the organization pays to maintain good order. Sometimes control and oversight are what's needed for the organization to succeed. But sometimes they're just a remnant left over from a time when organizations were truly similar to machines. Modern organizations are more similar to living organisms than to machines. Continuing to try to manage them like machines is a bit like trying to train a cat. And that wraps up today's podcast, where we explored counterfactual thinking and how organizations can benefit from embracing flexibility over rigid machine-like structures. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.